We would have been around for about 5 years, and our claim to fame when we started is that we are the world's smallest international publisher, because we actually, half of us is based in just up the road here, in the East Midlands, just north of Nottingham, and the other half is based in Christchurch, New Zealand. That's a very long story, and that is not the purpose of today. The purpose of today is about Margaret's book. And I know that some of you will know some of this book and will know some of that book. But Margaret came to our stand last year and asked about submissions, and I had a young lady on the stand who was very persuasive, wasn't she? And she persuaded Margaret to submit the book, and to be perfectly honest, 50 pages in, you had to make me think of a reason to say no. I couldn't think of a reason to say no. And when I found out there was books 2 and 3, and books 2 and 3 were also in polished draft form, I don't think it was the hardest contract decision that we ever made. Perhaps not quite the easiest, but certainly very much in the top 3 for that. Seat in the middle, there's a seat at the front. And we have then gone through the process with Margaret, getting through the whole process, getting the book edited, getting the cover design done, and then finally getting the book out. We had, in the end, we had on the final part of the process, the actual production process, we had 8 days slack to get it ready to launch today. That's tighter than we like to cut it. In actual fact, we didn't use a single day of that slack. So not only is the book out, but there was a very nice UPS man that delivered it and actually carried it in for us. Literally 8 days ahead of when we thought. So, so far, pretty good. So I've got a few questions for Margaret, and what I'm going to do is just ask those questions and let Margaret answer in her own way.
Yes. Do you want me to stand up to answer, or do you want me to sit down?
No, I stood up to do the intro, so I'm going to sit down to question.
And I'll stand up.
That was entirely up to you.
Yeah, I'll stand up.
There we go.
Saves me having that.
As you see, we are very well rehearsed. Actually, yeah, we rehearsed that bit in the lift. People were wondering why we were sitting down and standing up in the lift, but never mind. So, Margaret, the Land of Broken Promises has been a long time in the gestation.
You could say that again.
How long have you been working on it, and why has it taken you that long?
Well, Jean, was it 25 years? Jean got me started. I went to her writing class and read out some stories that I used to read to the kids about my own childhood. And she said, you want to make that into a book? Well, by the time I'd been to another writing class, and this was a memoir I was writing, and that tutor said, well, now you need to kill off that brother, he does nothing for the story. I decided it better be fiction. And by the time I finished the fiction, I realised that I had done a very, very one-sided story of the Palestine struggle. So, luckily, or by some amazing miracle, the librarian at the library where I used to deliver books to handicapped said, my mother was in Palestine at that time. Isn't she the secretary of the local synagogue? So I went to her and we basically did the story of Dahlia together. And then she was very ill, couldn't help anymore. But she saved me from one dreadful mistake. Because Dahlia was I started calling her Christine as initially. It's the sort of thing I do. I talked about beef burgers when I was doing a Hindu. I mean, I know perfectly well what I can do. My words sort of come out of my mouth. And then, when I'd done Dahlia, I thought, well, I've done a very two-sided story here. I need the third story. So I got a package tour to Israel and stayed at Tiberias in a hotel. They didn't realise I was there because most people stayed there for one night, the coach trips. But I got on Arab buses and went to Nazareth, and I saw a primary school with the words written in English, primary school, and so I jumped off. I was written in Arabic as well, jumped off, and went to the desk and saw the secretary and said, do you know any retired teachers I can ask about the events in Palestine in 1948 from an Arab point of view? And she said yes, and she introduced me to a lovely lady who invited me to a wonderful chicken meal with her family, and she gave me so much background, and we conversed by email, which her son set up, until she became very ill and couldn't manage it any longer. But so that was the story. But that wasn't matter because she was a Christian Arab. That character appears as Susanna in the series now, but after a while I thought, well, most of the Arabs in Palestine, the majority of them were Muslim. And I had a whole lot of Muslim friends, so I bombarded them with questions. The ones from Egypt, actually I was surprised, their type of Muslim was so very, very different from the type in Palestine. So I had to go through my memories for a lot for Palestine, for Nafta. But she was such an insistent character, wanting to have a book of her own, I had to have it. And then the rest of the time was taken with learning to write, structure. And I originally started the structure with all three characters in each book, and each book chronologically followed on from the others. But it didn't work as literature. It worked politically much better, but it didn't work as literature. So eventually I changed them all to one character per book, and just hope that everybody's going to buy three, because if they only buy one, they get a very lopsided picture each time.
Can I just add one last comment to that one? The one thing, publishers love the number 3. You get us with a proposal for a trilogy, you've crossed 2 hurdles to start with, because books 2 and 3, in theory, there's far less effort from our perspective, and therefore far less cost from our perspective, getting the book out of the door. And at the end of the day, we're a business, I'm an author too, but we're a business to sell books. You've partly answered the second question.
Sorry.
There are very few English language books based in the British Mandate of Palestine. Fewer still set there actually during World War II. What drew you to that place in time?
Well, what drew me to that was my childhood home. And what drew me to the political aspect was again my childhood, because my father and I were very close in that period, and I listened into every adult conversation, and he was involved during the war with the Middle East Intelligence Center, would have stayed in Palestine if the Germans had invaded, to work with the resistance groups. Well, you know what children are like with their eyes and ears, and they know everything that German spies would have loved to have known. And what made me aware that I didn't know everything, and that people had hidden a lot of the truths, was when I was nearly 6. I was at the bottom of a very large garden we had in Jerusalem, overlooking the railway. I had climbed onto that wall by way of a ramp that the Arabs had built to shoot at the trains while we were away on holiday in England. My parents didn't know about that, they didn't know I could get to the top of the wall. But I got to the top of the wall because I wanted to wait at the train, which had just started rerunning after it had been stopped because of the troubles. So I sat on that wall, waiting for the train. I loved trains then. And along came not a train, but a little trolley. And on the trolley, there were line inspectors at the front, railway line inspectors. At the back, there were 2 British policemen with Tommy guns. At the sides, there were 2 Arab Fellaheen prisoners with chains on their ankles, working the levers. And in the middle, on a chair, sat a very dignified looking man wearing a European suit but with a peasant's keffiyeh on his head, because all Arabs wore keffiehs during that period, because if they didn't, they tended to get assassinated. And he reminded me, as he stared ahead in this dignified manner, of a picture I had in my Bible of Jesus before Pontius Pilate. The image stayed with me, but I didn't tell anybody about it because I didn't want to get into trouble for climbing the wall. But, 9 years later, when I was 15, I think, I mentioned it to my mother. And she got very cross. She said the British never put hostages on railway trolleys. So I assumed that it was a false image, a false memory, and tucked it away into a cabinet as false memory. Until about 20 years after that, I found a picture in a book of British soldiers putting an Arab hostage onto a trolley. And so I realised how much had been hidden, wondered why my mother had lied. Because my mother never lied, she was the most truthful person I knew. And I realised that she hadn't deliberately lied. It must have been psychological, because she believed that the British were there to convert everybody, and they had God's work to do. And if the British did that, it wouldn't have conformed with her idea of what the British were doing. Does that answer the question?
I'm going to skip a couple.
Yes.
I'm under orders.
I know my notes you're skipping.
No, we'll come back to that one. Actually, I'm not going to skip that one. You have been a long-time member of Leicester Writing.
Huh?
You've been a long-time member of Leicester Writing.
Yes.
I know you served as chair. In your experience, how important to your writing, half of these people here know how important to your writing has been membership of such a body? Are there other benefits, and would you recommend it?
It has been crucial to my writing. I've had so many helpful critiques from the members of Leicester Writers' Club. I'm absolutely positive, hearing what I hear about other writers' clubs, that it's the best writers' club.
Oh, less members than I thought.
The people are friendly. They give you really rigid critiques. You have to have a thick skin, but they're friendly with it. They're doing it to help you, and to help your writing. It also get good friends when you're there. You go away on holidays with them, and it's rather nice. Does that answer that question?
Sort of. But how about from the perspective of if there was somebody here who wanted to join the writing club? Not that there's
right.
but
if you want to join the writing club, the first we don't take everybody, but we take nearly everybody. The biggest quality you have to want is to improve your writing and to be able to take critiques. If you do that, then we welcome you with open arms. We want people who will improve their writing. We don't want people who know it already, basically. Because, I mean, what's the point of them joining? No. And once they're in, well, I think they enjoy the atmosphere.
To say we've got a stall downstairs, if anyone's interested. We do have the stall. We have a stall downstairs.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, yeah. Yes, the Leicester Writers Club have a stall downstairs. You can all go and sign up and submit your pieces for membership.
What made you choose to submit to a small press publisher? I suppose I should hide under the chair for this question. And what prompted you to submit to a
Well, basically, I'm a very mean person. I don't like spending out thousands of pounds at a time. So I like somebody else to do that bit for me. So that's, I needed a publisher. I wasn't going to self-publish, except if I put it on Kindle, which doesn't cost anything anyway. But I wanted somebody to look through my work and edit it. I wanted somebody to say, this is good work. I didn't want to put rubbish out. So, some people self-publish, and they probably are at the peak of their trade. They know what they're doing. But for most people, you get so much help from a publisher. One thing when I did ask, and I chose Bluewood as my publisher, and it wasn't their fault that it wasn't strictly true. They did tell me that they did a lot of the marketing. But publishers, it goes against, the book trade goes against independent publishers for marketing. It's very, very difficult for marketers to market independent publishers. And so it probably doesn't pay independent publishers nowadays to have a specific person there for marketing. And you have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. And they do some for you, guys. They put it on Amazon and they put, so you don't have to do the boring bits like getting the ISBN and going through gardeners, and what's the other one? I think
we have a long list.
Yes, a long list of all the people that the bookshops go to get the book. So if you go to a bookshop and order my book, and the bookshop says they can't get it, they're lying. They can.
And can you say is, we have had that happen a lot. And we have, our authors are spread all over the world. We actually have an author who was able to get her book on the shelf, but through her own work, in Waterstones in Wakefield, and the manager in the Waterstones in Leeds turned round and said, we can't get it, we can't even get it for order. Well, why is your shop down the road got it? I hope he gets a speeding fine soon, because she's actually a magistrate. Right, okay. Going back to the trilogy, most books about Palestine take a very partisan approach. Your trilogy does not. In the first book, British, second book, Palestinian, and the third one, Jewish heroine. Why did you really choose that tripartisan approach?
Right, can I just first say something about the word Palestinian?
Okay.
In before the Mandate, Jews and Arabs were all Palestinians. And Jews were proud to say, I am a Jew of Palestine, I am a Palestinian Jew. But, so, when I talk about Palestinians, I'm not necessarily talking about Jews. I'm talking about Arabs, I'm talking about Armenians, and I'm talking about a whole host of other people who were living in Palestine at the end of the Ottoman era, when it came under British occupation. And they had to have a nationality so they could have a passport and move about the country. So, now why don't I take a partisan approach? When people ask me whose side I'm on, I always say, well, it depends which book I'm writing at the time. Oh, a bit like that in life, you know, you can sway me easily from one side to another. Because everybody is right in some aspects, and everybody is wrong in some aspects. And the trick is, if only people would get together and listen to other people's rights and think about their own wrongs, then, but we're human beings, we don't do that. It's not in our genes, I think, to work that way. We're a pack animal, and need to regard other packs as the enemy at times.
Thanks. I'm not sure whether you put this question on this list for me or for you. The disclaimer at the front of your book. See, look at the face. Look at the sacrificial lamb here. Claims all locations and characters are fictional. Is this strictly true?
No.
I know it is.
It's what we call a legal fiction. I worked hard to make all my real locations real. I put in real characters, if they're not main characters, and try not to put words in their mouth. My fictional characters are all fictional, the main characters, but they are, they're not stereotypes, but they could have lived if somebody else had been living in their place. And I've made 2 fictional locations. One is Zamzum, which is very, very similar to another colony, Jewish colony in the Negev, that was started at that same time, and for the same reasons, and agricultural research. And the other fictional one is Bereshit, which is basically where Karkor is now. But if you're describing people's homes and people who live in the village, a small village, you have to make it fictional, because otherwise it's so small everybody knows everybody else, and says, she never lived there. Is that the end of the questions?
Yeah, that was the end.
Thank you.